Welcome to the Sales Readiness podcast brought to you by S&G, a part of SBI. Each episode features an unfiltered conversation between our host, SBI's Managing Director Ray Makela, and an industry expert about the strategies, skills, and solutions that drive sales performance to the next level. These conversations are packed with expert advice, real-world examples, and practical tips to help you close deals, lead teams, and outperform the competition. In this episode, Ray is joined by Sarah Bedwell, an executive consultant at SBI with over 15 years of enterprise and commercial sales experience. Listen in as the two explore the complexities surrounding selling to the C-suite, with insights on building impactful executive-level conversations, research you should be conducting, and crafting a long-term vision to bring with you to the executive's office. Learn how to secure access, deliver value, and approach every executive-level meeting with purpose and precision.
Hey, Sarah, welcome to the podcast. So happy you could join us today. How are you?
I'm great. I'm thrilled to be here. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. I know we're both passionate about this topic and excited to jump in to talk about selling to the C-suite, kind of getting access to key executives and why that's important. And so we're gonna dive in because I know we have a lot to cover, but maybe just teeing it up, can you share just a little bit about your background, both from a sales and sales enablement perspective, and kind of why this topic is one that you're particularly interested in.
Oh, you bet. So I've been doing this for 20 years, and half of that was as a seller, and then the latter half as an enablement and go-to-market professional. And I remember back when I was first promoted to enterprise sales, and I was the first person at Tableau Software that they promoted from the commercial team to enterprise. And all I knew is I was being faced with the big, shiny bank towers in downtown London, and I had to somehow go prospect into them. And I still remember the first meeting I ever prospected into with the chief marketing officer. Um, and I worked so hard. I worked for months to get that meeting, and I, went up the 44 floors, and we started the conversation, and it crashed and burned in the first 5 minutes. And I just knew I was never going to talk to that man again. And got out of there, got off the phone, called a friend of mine who's a real professional at those types of conversations. And he's like, "Don't worry, Sarah, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do." And I did that the next week with the CIO of BNP Paribas, and it worked exceedingly well. They became a Jewel customer. So now my job is to help other people learn how to do that. But it's near and dear to my heart, right?
No, that's great. Well, and great story to kick things off. And I will share, I think, all of us have heard if we've carried a bag, been in sales, hey, you got to get higher, right? You got to get to that executive, that C-suite. And I know early in my career, I always scratch my head and it's like, well, wait a minute, what am I going to say when I get there? Or, why is that so important? Because I can get access to these people who like us and they'll have the conversations. So I want to lean in on that more. And I think, to your point about we need to be prepared and we need to really think about those conversations. So we'll talk about both getting access and then what do we do? I had a similar experience, was calling on a local retailer here in Seattle, but to their IT department was selling IT services. And, when the CIO picked up the phone and he answered and he says, well, what can you do differently than the other 20 guys that have called me today? And it was like, wow, if you don't have a good answer to that question, you probably don't have the right to call. So anyway, let's dive in. I think this idea of selling high is important. Why should they do it? Like it's harder to get access. It's tough to get those meetings, but why is it important to think about the executive level and selling to that C-suite?
Well, I mean, they're the netting it out of, they're going to get things done. So they're going to make it faster to close your business. They're less price sensitive. So if it aligns to what they need to do, they're a huge activator for that. But then there's also just the reality of a couple of things. And I think one of the things that many of us don't realize early on in our sales career is that the person that's calling you or responding to you is oftentimes not the buyer, not the person who can say yes. Somewhere up the chain, an executive got triggered, something bad hit their radar, and they went and assigned a person on their team. And that's who you're talking to. They're on the buying decision team, but they're not the actual buyer. So whether you like it or not, behind the scenes, that person's involved. And it's really a question of, are you going to try and influence them or not? But those conversations are happening with or without you. And then, of course, we all know with COVID, that threshold came down. So now, people who used to be able to sign off on 1 million, they can't anymore. They can sign off on, 100,000. And so there's a
Right.
lot more decision makers involved. So I think those are all really important reasons why it matters.
Absolutely. And yeah, I know definitely from our SBI research, right? There are more decision makers. There are people swooping in and out. And unless we've mapped that business decision making team and really understand who those executives are, I think, we may get surprised, right? And that's what we don't want to do late in the deal. And I think that C-suite, I mean, they can make the decisions and they often have the budget authority that we're looking for. I'm always reminded there was a story about, the bank robber. I'd have to share this because I think it's so applicable. But this guy Willie Sutton, right? When they arrested him, and they're like, "Well, why do you rob these banks?" And his answer, and it's become kind of one of those cliches, is, "Well, that's where the money is," right? And I think about it the same way with the C-suite. It's like, well, that's where the money is. That's where the decision making is. It can accelerate the deals. They can approve, uh, you know, larger amounts, and often even open up our eyes to other opportunities if we can get that. But it's not easy, right? So, when we think about that, we can get access to the mid-level, and have those conversations. But how is it different when we're selling to the C-suite versus a mid-level manager or maybe a user advocate that will take our meeting?
Yeah, I mean, and we know so much, I think all of us intuitively know this. It is so much about business outcomes. And it's about business outcomes that tend to be broader and span more departments, oftentimes in one, not always. Um, but as an example, there's a client I'm working with right now where Gong is selling to this client. And I love Gong. I'm a huge fan of Gong. But there was no budget for Gong at the start of this year. So what did Gong figure out with this executive? Gong figured out that this executive was just brought in recently to turn around the business and drive growth. And they figured out how to help that executive connect the dots on the things that he needs to do to drive growth will be dramatically positively impacted by having the capability of conversation intelligence of Gong. So what did that executive do? He said, I have a budget. I was going to spend it on this other stuff. I think this is going to impact my business more. So we're going to move that budget over here and spend it on this. But that's because Gong's doing a good job of talking to him about top line revenue, growth, participation rates among his team. He wants to double that. And so as long as you're connecting to those things, I think that's what makes it a big difference. As opposed to feature function, he doesn't particularly care about all that, to be honest.
Right. No, and often we're so in love with our products, right? We want to talk about all that stuff versus the business outcomes, and we'll get back to that. But I think, yeah, how can we help advance the executive's agenda, right? And that's really
Right.
the concept around our headway selling, this new research that we've done about we need to help our clients make headway towards their objectives and think ahead, not just solving today's problem, but where are they headed? So I think it's a really good call out. Um, you know, we often hear in deal coaching meetings, it's like, oh, well, we need to get in front of the executives, when we're ready to close the deal. But when is it appropriate to meet with the executives? Like when in the sales process?
So, always early on and then late on, because that's typically their role, right? Is in identifying the problem and deciding if the company's going to spend resources figuring it out. And then they'll assign somebody to go figure that out. And then they'll ratify the solution towards the end. And, typically my advice is don't try to meet with them unless you feel like you've got a problem that you can solve of theirs or you have something new to teach them. So that's where it's, I know we always say when, okay, early and late, but also when you're ready. Because you're not going to get a second shot if they think that meeting wasn't worth their time.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. We really have to know, well, what is it that we're asking them to do, or why is it important for them to know about this versus just we're able to get the meeting and they're like, well, that was a waste of time. Right. And we get about 5 minutes before they realize, okay, I've got something else, I've got a phone call or something. So
Well,
yeah.
and it's funny, but, there's the big picture stuff of why would they even wanna talk to us, and that takes research and preparation, and one of my favorite moves on that is talking to their team, because there is so much wealth of insight there that we can gather and bring to them, in addition to our perspective of other clients, industries, etcetera. I was someone told me this joke, so this isn't my joke, but maybe you've heard this. of the person who falls down in the manhole, like they fall down through the hole in the street,
Right.
and they're calling up and saying, "I can't get out, help me." And a doctor walks by and, throws in a prescription. And it's like, that's not helping. And then a priest walks by and, throws in a prayer for them. And then the person's best friend walks by and jumps in the hole with them. And they said, "What are you doing? Now we're both down here." And the friend says, "Yeah, but I've been down here before and I know the way out." And I think that's what so often the executives are looking for is they just want reassurance that you've been here before, you've seen my problem, you know how to solve it, and you're going to save me time and resources figuring that out. And so, you don't have long to establish that credibility, but you got to do it really, really quick because they're probably going to get interrupted anyway. And then your meeting time's cut.
Well, I love that story, and it's a good metaphor because I think the more we can be that best friend and even share, hey, we just helped somebody just like you go through this. And the more we're able to share those stories, the more I think we pique their interest because they want to know, hey, what are my peers doing? What are my competitors doing? That's a great call out. So I know you've seen a ton of these types of pursuits. You've coached, hundreds and hundreds of reps in your career. Where do you see sales executives missing the mark? Like what challenges do they run into, or what frustrates the C-suite about salespeople?
I mean, it's definitely you're wasting my time. So it's, hey, get to the point, talk numbers. What's the impact that you think I can make? And they can't stand it when you question them to death without earning the right first, meaning you're not bringing me any value. So why am I spending my time educating you on my business? And they really don't like it when you're talking feature function stuff. They'll just kick you right back downstairs. So it kind of goes back. I try to keep things super simple of, can you help me solve a problem? And talk to me about that. Or can you teach me something new I didn't already know? And we really try to bring that to every single meeting.
Yeah, and I think that's so critical is both the patience, and there may be some distraction, right? So you've only got a certain amount of time, and their time is really expensive. I mean, do the math, but every hour they're spending could be worth hundreds and hundreds, if not more, uh, direct impact, right? Direct
Oh, right.
dollars,
I
and
so when I was at Tableau Software back in the day, I was actually an employee there. We had a CEO change. So they brought in Adam Silipsky to be our new CEO. So Adam was running AWS. And he's an incredible executive. And he sat down with me and said, "Sarah, this is what I was chief of staff for the enterprise team at the time, right?" So he's our CEO. And he said, "I want you to train our enterprise team to ask me for what will be the absolute best value of each minute that I could spend. So here's how I want you to train them to think about that." So it was, I mean, this isn't theoretical. That is literally how he thought as an executive.
no, I think that's a great, and that is a question they're asking themselves, right? What's the best use of my time here? What can I do? And if somebody's wasting their time, they're not going to have the patience for it. And I think there was an HBR article years and years ago, but said, the biggest thing that executives are frustrated with when salespeople show up is they don't know their business. Like
Yeah.
they haven't done either. They don't know the industry. They love their product. They're very knowledgeable about the product, but they don't understand that particular business or the business challenge. And, especially now with ChatGPT, Copilot, AI tools, there's no excuse for that. Like we should be an expert when we walk into that building, and we'll get into that more, as we go along. But yeah, I think that's a critical point. In our selling to key executives curriculum, we talk about questions, and I really love this exercise because it kind of flips it around and says, well, instead of us thinking about questions, we're going to ask, what's on the executive's mind, right?
Mhm.
So, what are some of those questions that might be top of mind for the executive when you walk into that room where they decide to take the meeting?
I mean, so this is one of the things that I remember the first time I went through our training on selling to key executives, and this was such a jewel that I literally have it written down because I use it all the time. But,
Yeah.
what outcomes can you help us achieve? Like, cut to the chase. How are you different? How are you going to do that in some way that's different than what I've seen before? How are you going to impact my stakeholders? How easily and effectively can I work with you? And what's the value long term? So if I decide to change, which takes my time, energy, my people's time and energy, is it going to be worth it? Because there's some long-term play for us here. And I think that's a great summary, and that has never led me astray.
Yeah, and I do think it's interesting to put the executive hat on and just do the what if, or again, role play with an AI bot. But what is that executive probably thinking about? And let's take their perspective and try to elevate ourselves up to that level, right? Versus we're coming in trying to pitch. Because if we're coming in trying to pitch, I think we've already lost.
So Ray, one of the things feel super passionate about is I remember so well being a commercial rep and hearing that type of guidance. And where I got stuck was, well, how? How do I really get inside their mind? I wanted to. And I remember I spent probably 3 days Googling, some aspects of banking, trying to learn that.
Right.
What I'm curious for you too is what has been most effective for you in understanding that executive mindset? And things that have really helped me are I go interview friends that I have or, friends of friends do that job and ask them, what were you thinking and feeling and doing? What's on, tell me a story of a meeting that went great. Tell me one that did. What are the pressures that are on you? Tell me a day in your life. That has been really helpful. And then another is really using the persona documents and buyer mapping that my company provided. It's not an exercise in futility or fake words on a page when it's done right. But I
Right.
think that how of, how do you get inside that executive mind is so important. So I didn't know if there's anything that's worked for you.
No, I think it's great to think about that individual. To your point, we often have generic persona documents, or we kind of generally understand those roles. But getting down to the next level of detail, like what does that mean for that particular company? As you said, if we have a coach or somebody inside who can help
Mhm.
connect the dots there, and really think about, well, what are their particular challenges? And they may be able to share that if we know somebody, they're like, what are you hearing? Like, what are the executives beating on the table, or what are those top priorities? So that when we go in, we're not saying what keeps you up at night, right? But we're saying, hey, I understand this is a key priority. Can you tell me more about how you're addressing this issue or that issue that we've seen come up before, when organizations are going through this kind of change, or whatever that is. So
That's a
uh,
great point. I think
connecting
talking to
those dots.
people who know them about their priorities is one of the swiftest shortcuts there. Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into that a little bit further. I mean, we have this model that we introduced. You're familiar with the research. It's ramped, right? Research, access, meet, and propose. So we go through those steps. It starts with research. And how is that different with key executives when we're planning those calls and we're doing it? Because people are familiar with call plans and we fill out our planner, but let's build on that. How is that different for the C suite?
Well, I love always having a model because when you have a model, then you can have disciplined execution, right? And so one of the models that we use is how are you going to do industry research? So PEST, so political, economic, social, technology. What do
Yeah.
you similar bullets under company, similar under person? And what I love about that is executives are really impacted by the external world. So when regulation change, a lot of their triggers, what causes them to realize they have a problem. Sometimes it's internal. So, business missed its number, EBITDA's off, whatever. But oftentimes it's external too. And they're going to be paying attention to that at a level that's totally different than an operator. So I think making sure a lot of the times when I coach reps, they'll really be doing company research pretty well. Sometimes personal research pretty well. You just can't forget industry, including what their competition's doing. And then on the personal front, we've just seen so much success in people looking at the executives' socials, their mutual connections, things like that. So you just can't forget that piece. ChatGPT has been, a miracle in saving time on these things too. So I'm curious, is there anything else that's been standing out to you?
Well, I think the pest analysis, and again, as you mentioned, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, whatever you're using, but
Yeah.
training it, I mean, it probably knows what pest is to begin with, but at least saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, and here's the approach. Can you do this analysis, like pest for the industry and for the company? So what's going on politically, economically, socially, technologically? You learn more in 5 minutes than you might have. The other thing I like to do, again, I'm going to leverage some of the AI tools, but have it consume the quarterly or annual report and say, can you give me a summary? Like, what would the CIO care about? What would the chief sales officer care about? What's top of mind here? So we can distill a lot of that information so quickly. And I know, those of us who have been selling for a while are used to going to the 10K and trying to, decipher the notes and the management section. We can, get a summary now, validate that, right? You want to make sure you're going in with real information and you have the most recent, et cetera. But yeah, I think we want to go in armed with that information, before we have those conversations. Absolutely.
Yeah, agreed. And in fact, you gave me the tip of asking it questions that are valuable, like, how does this company make money? What personas does this company sell to? Organize it in a table. So you're exactly right. Once you get those prompts down, I use that almost every day, right? It's so helpful.
Yeah, and that, telling it how you need what you're trying to do and how you need the output of putting it into a table, summarize this by, key area. Now you have your talking points, right? And so you can go in with some assumptions. The only thing I'd add to that is, we have an agenda we're trying to get through. We better be very succinct about that, and prepared, but we want to tee that up with the research. So I always say we want to get credit for the work that we've done. Say, hey, when I was reading your annual report, I was really struck by how you grew in this region or how you're expanding this product set. And I was, again, curious how you're addressing maybe some of these issues. So we're going in informed. I think we establish our credibility because we've done that. And we're hopefully able to come in with some stories of how we've helped others and share that. So I think that's going to be critical.
And it's a great point is it's all about building trust of, okay, you did do your work and you're someone that is a serious professional who's not here to waste my time. I love that. That's a really gentle way of doing that and showing you that you're honoring their time.
Yeah. No, that's very critical. Well, let's share, and I know we're going to get into access and the actual meeting, in a future podcast, but maybe we can talk a little bit or just share what are some takeaways that you would want to provide for sales professionals, based on what we've talked about today, based on your experience in selling to key executives.
What a great question. I think the first is just making sure it takes a lot of time um, to get a meeting with a key executive. So I think the first is understanding, are you really clear on when you should go for that or not? So for example, if your solution costs a lot for what they need, if it will have a significant impact on them, um, if it will require some real partnership, those are all reasons to go do that. I wouldn't just go do it if you don't have a good reason because it's going to take a lot of your time and it could really close the door for the future. So I think that's number one. Number two is you have to be so clear on what is the ask for them. So I remember I had a meeting with a CRO, and by the end he said, "So what do you want me to do? Did you just want me to know about this?" So it kind of goes to that same thing of what is the ask for them, and then do that research, do that preparation because it's you're not going to get another shot. What about you, Ray? What are some of your top
Well, no, I love that because it flips it to what do we want them to take away versus what are we trying to do, right? Because often it's, well, what is our call objective? Great. But what do we want them to leave there, either helping us decide, is it a future meeting? Are we trying to advance? Are we trying to verify information? Like, what is that specific action at the end of this meeting? The executive will do X, Y, or Z. And if we can't answer that question, yeah, we probably don't deserve to have that meeting. And also, it really helps inform our call plan, the research, everything else is, oh, that's why we're meeting with this individual. And it may be just to inform them and to set a follow on meeting, but that's great. At least we know that's the case. But, is that going to be worth 30 minutes of the executive's time? Oh, we need to be able to answer that
Well,
question.
Ray, I want to draw one little underline because you know me, my teacher heart is what beats in my body. If whoever's listening to this, if you just write down as a result of this meeting, the executive will blank. When you can answer that question, then you're getting closer to ready. And if you can't yet, you have more thinking to do. That's a great tool.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up for today. Really appreciate your time and the conversation. We could go on for this with this for hours, but we'll have a part two. We'll talk about gaining access and what we actually do in the meeting. So great chatting with you, Sarah. Thank
Oh,
you.
I love to see you, Ray. And
All
thanks for
right.
the time today.
You've been listening to SBI's Sales Readiness Podcast with Managing Director Ray Makela hosting. Visit sbigrowth.com to read SBI's latest research, join upcoming events, or learn about SBI's talent and training services. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and connect with us on LinkedIn.